Yeah.
Okay. Fine. So, for the last class, we were discussing on the styles, right? We looked at various things and we looked at organization pattern and others, and we were discussing on style. So, I told you there are two things that we would discuss under style. First thing is you look at the arrangement of sentences themselves. Okay. So, whether short or long, we looked at the short and the long distinctions in the sentence, if I'm not wrong, right? This particular part, sentence length, right? Under the style, the first thing that we discussed was the sentence length. And we discussed a bit about shorter sentences and long sentences. Okay. We also discussed about how in realistic expressions, that is in real constructions of the sentences, you use a combination of both, right? So they both have their own purposes to serve. However, to achieve most of the purposes for which you use professional writing, we use a combination of both. We also looked at that example of an email about um, professional offers for your client, right? So under that particular rubric about the sentence length and the combination of using sentences with different lengths, understanding what each length would stylistically mean, we looked at uh, different styles of arranging these sentences of different length. And under that, we have looked at segregating style. Remember this, we looked at these examples. They were short, uncomplicated sentences, usually with one subject and its predicate, right? We talked about this at length in the last class, right? Uh, then we looked at the kite train style. We told that, unlike the your first style, which is segregating style, this one is this helps you to build a logical connection, and via logical linking, it helps you to have a experiential feeling of what is being described. Okay, this was not allowed or this was not possible with the segregating style because they were very short and very, they were meant for more emphasis. If you were looking for just emphatic expression of what you wanted to say, those short sentences in the segregating style was okay. But if you're looking for a more elaborate style, something wherein you want to build an experiential feeling around the reader, um, right train style was way more suitable. It allowed for a very smooth movement into the next sequence in order. So this also helped you build sequence. That was the thing that we looked at. We looked at a few examples also. Parallel style was particularly in connection with usage of expressions that were grammatically the equivalent of each other, right? And we looked at how this particular style can be used to build rhythm, right? To build rhythm and also we used to express various tones like ironic or emotional or intellectual, right? This was the main function that was rendered by the parallel style. We looked at a lot of examples under that as well. Now, the last one in this, wherein you're looking at the combination of the lengths, different lengths of sentences, will be the subordinating style. Okay. Now, what does subordinating style mean? This word subordination is familiar to you in the context of clauses. What was subordination in the context of clauses? If someone can, educate just to warm you up into this. What did subordination refer to in clauses? No, no idea. I think this was the first week of lecture.
I think uh, it joins the two dependent clause.
Yeah, no. Basically, subordination refers to dependent clauses, right? Something that is built around the main clause or what you call as independent clause. Yeah, grammatically, that's all we meant by that. Right. So the same idea is now being used to construct a special style which has its own stylistic meanings. Okay. Now, what is it? It just simply means focusing on one idea and arranging points of lesser importance. So, this one idea will be the main idea, which definitely is going to be expressed in the main clause. Okay. And other lesser important ideas are built around this main clause. Okay. So main clause is going to carry your main idea. All the other points of lesser importance will be taken up by the other subordinate clauses that would be built around that. Okay. So that is why, so because of the presence of the subordinate clauses, they have named it as the subordinating. And what is it that you need to keep in mind? That your central idea, whichever one is your main idea, will go to your main clause, and the that are lesser important will go to the subordinate clauses. Now, based on the positioning of the subordinate clauses, okay, this is where you place your subordinate clause in the larger sentence. There are four distinctions to the subordinating style. Okay. Now, the first one is loose structure. We'll look at loose structure first. Loose structure is the straightforward one where you have the main clause coming in first in the sentence, followed by the subordinate clause or clauses. Okay. It can be one clause and can be many clauses. Depending on how many you want to add, you can decide what you want to do with it. But in terms of its arrangement, in the loose structure, the first one that comes is the main clause, followed by all the other subordinate clauses. The example on your screen, very fairly simple sentences. We must always be wary of conclusion drawn from the ways of the social insects, since their evolutionary track lies so far from ours. Okay, clear distinction. The first part of the sentence that you just that I just read out becomes your main clause. Why? It has its own subject, it has its own verb, right? And it's a complete in itself. The second part, since their evolutionary track lies so far from ours, is your subordinate clause. Okay. Now, with respect to style, it also means we are more concerned about the style and what it means here than how it is arranged. So, based on how a loose structure looks, the second part, since their evolutionary track lies so far from ours, with its very placement in the latter part, in the last part of the sentence, tells you that this is the lesser important part. Okay. Main part, the main idea that was supposed to be that should go to the reader was the first part in the main clause, that we should be wary of conclusions drawn from the ways of social research. The second part is lesser important and then comes and takes up the subordinate clause. Okay. One more example of I found a large hall, obviously a former garage, dimly lit and packed with coats. Now see, you have obviously a former garage, dimly lit, packed with coats. All of them are what? They are all subordinate phrases. Okay, so subordinate phrases or clauses. It needn't be clauses all the time, can also be phrases. In this case, they are mostly phrases. Okay, so all those three things, the previous sentence just one, but this one has three subordinate phrases. However, the first part, I found a large hall, becomes your main clause, and that is the main idea that the writer wants to express. Major thing is that I found a large hall. Rest of it just into details which are not, which are lesser, which are less important than the previous one. The idea expressed in the names. Okay. Now, when can you use them? This is used mostly in informal situations. Okay, mostly it has a colloquial usage, right? And it goes by the principle first things first. Okay, so whenever you want to get things done, quickly, right? You don't want to bluff around anything. You can use this fairly loose where you're placing the thing in a sequential order. Okay, I want this thing done first, hence I'm going to place this as my first part. Okay, and I'm going to encode that in the main clause of the sentence. Okay, so this is usually the style that you use when you talk. Okay, I want to get this thing done quickly. Okay, so usually in forms of commands or when you give instructions, you tend to use such loose structure mostly. Okay, and yeah, so the major principle here would be that mostly informal situations and resembles the way you talk, okay, and has mostly colloquial usage. And has, if you ask me about the tone, it maintains much of a very relaxed tone. Okay? That's the appropriate usage of a sentence that comes with a loose structure under subordinating style. The next one would be periodic, which does exactly the opposite of what a loose structure does. Okay, what does it do? It reverses the order. Keeps the subordination first and places the main clause at the end. Okay. Now, example: if there is no future of the black ghetto, the future of all Negroes is diminished. So, The main part of it is the future of all Negroes is diminished. But what is kept in the first part? The subordinate clause, the if conditional. That's put in the first place. Now, where do you use them? That is more important for us to know. This particular style is used when you want to emphasis on a particular part. Okay, if your intention is to emphasize to um, um, you know press on a particular aspect in the sentence, a particular idea in the sentence, then the tendency is to use a periodic style wherein you place the principal clause or the main clause at the end and you keep the subordination in the beginning. Okay. So if you delay the principal thought, it increases. So this is generally a theme. Okay. So beyond this particular structure, periodic structure or anything, in stylistic expressions, whenever you want to lay emphasis on something, when you want to stress the importance of something, the general idea is to place them towards the end. Okay, to place them towards the end. Connect this with, uh, something like the organization of paragraph, organization of pattern within a paragraph. Remember the general to specific pattern? What did it do? If you can recall from the previous lectures. I'm just trying to draw connection between that organization within the paragraph to this particular style between arrangement of sentences, about arrangement of sentences. You remember what general to specific did? Anyone respond to that? No? Don't remember? Nobody wants to try? So what happened in general to specific?
Ma'am, maybe as if we come to the point at last.
Yeah, we come to the point at last. Yeah, correct, Shrestha. Yeah, so yeah, what happens in that is that you place the major idea at the end, right? You come to the point at the last. Exactly the same thing. And I told you that that particular kind of writing is used when you want to write persuasively, right? When you want to call for action. Okay. So you summarize everything right in the beginning and then tell the reader. You basically are making it easy for the reader to understand what exactly they have to do. Okay. So those kind of pieces are written for policymakers and other people who are directly involved in the process of taking actions. So that is what we discussed while we were discussing the organization patterns, pattern general to specific, right? Now, if I connect that particular part with this one that we are discussing now about style, this is exactly what it does. Okay, not just for the periodic style. Okay, it happens to be a part of periodic style here, but generally when you refer to styles in them, particularly the arrangement of sentences, it is advised that to lay emphasis, to give something greater prominence, it is always better to uh, place that particular part at the end of the sentence. Okay, so end part of the sentence would give it more weight. We'll discuss it more. We have a couple of that also in discussion. But since we are at it, I thought it's better that I give you a heads up on that. Okay. So this is more formal and this is more literary in nature, okay, than your previous one, than your loose structure one. This looks more formal and sounds better and apt for a formal writing style than your previous loose structure. Okay, right. So look at the sentence: paralyzed by the neurotic lassitude engendered by meeting one's at every turn, around every corner, inside every cupboard, I go aimlessly from room to room. Obviously, right? The main point is I go aimlessly from room to room. And that has been placed at the end to tell you that, see, this is the important part. This is what we want you to pay attention to. The emphasis is laid on that. And stylistic, spatially, it is arranged towards the end of the sentence to tell the reader that, hey, we have so many things that goes before it. These are details, but what I want you to focus on is this. The main point is this. I go aimlessly from room to room. Okay, right. That's your periodic style. Now comes the convoluted structure. Okay, now convoluted structure, what does it do? The subordinate elements, right? what they do is they go to the main clause and they split it inside. They split the main clause from inside. Okay? And the split can happen between the subject and the verb, or it can also happen between the verb and the object, right? So the structure in a language like English is SVO, right? So ideally, if you look at it, the subject is placed before the verb and the object is followed by the verb, right? This is like a simple sentence. The structure of a simple sentence in English would look like this. In convoluted structure, what you do is you put intervening elements either between subject and the verb or between the verb and the object. Okay, so you break it open. So here in this case, subordinate elements are placed in between the main clause. So you first look at the main clause and then you break it open either at the between the subject and the verb or between the verb and the object and put in these subordinate elements. Okay, let's have a look at the example here. And once in a spasm of reflex chauvinism, she called Queen Victoria, whom she rather admired, a goddamned old water dog. Okay. Now, what is the main clause here? Can you tell me the main clause in this particular sentence you see on the screen? Right?
She rather admired a god old butt dog.
She called what? Queen Victoria, a goddamned old water dog, right? That becomes your main clause here. Where is it breaking? Where is it breaking? Where do you find the cut? Where do you find the split? Between
whom she rather admired.
Yeah, whom she rather admired is your placement, which is the intervening element. But where is the split happening? Is it between the subject and the verb, or is it between the verb and the object? No, cannot figure it out.
Verb and object.
Maybe not exactly the an object, but yes, you're right. It is the split is happening in the predicate of this, right? So she and called, the subject and verb are together here, but the split happens post that. Okay, after the verb. So between the verb and the object is where you see the split mostly, right? So we call Queen Victoria goddamn old water dog is the original sentence, and in between your verb and the object part, the predicative part, you see a split. Okay. Even and once in a spasm of reflex chauvinism is also a subordinate element, but then this is not in the convoluted structure because it's not causing any split anywhere else. But you may say that, since she is the subject sentence and the sentence here does not begin with it, you can say that somewhere it has also intervened with the positioning of the subject also by taking the prior position before the subject. Okay. But I will tell you, focus on the other part where the split is happening between the verb and the object. Okay. So that's clear, right? All right. We'll move on. Now, when do you use them? These kind of sentences, convoluted structures, mostly they're used when you want to add some variety to the way you're writing. When you think that, okay, I've written too many periodic sentences now, or, I've written too many sentences now in the segregating style or in the fragment style, trying to add some sort of variety. I need to avoid redundancy, to keep the reader hooked to what I'm writing, I'm going to use a variety. Every time you use a variety to do that, right? So when you plan to do something like that, when you plan to play around with the way you are writing, these kind of sentences, convoluted sentences, they help you a lot. Now keep this in mind. These kind of sentences should be very sparingly used in formal writing. Okay? Now, when you looked at the pre-sentence, you had to look at it carefully to understand what exactly it meant, right? You had to focus more on that. You had to look at it maybe one or two times to understand what it was. So given the confusion it can create, given the complication it creates with respect to structure, it is not a recommended style to be used in formal writing. Okay, formal writing will always go for your periodic structure, right? Because that helps you with two purposes. One is adding emphasis and placing things with greater prominence towards the end, and our purpose is fulfilled. Okay? But something like this, which has owing fact that it is going to have too many intervening clauses and phrases in between, it can create confusion to the readers in a formal space where you have limitations of time and space, right? So because of these reasons, it is not something that is recommended. However, it can be used sparingly. Very sparingly, you can use these things, but make sure that the documents that you create are not full of convoluted sentences, okay, or structure. All right. That's about this. And then I think we move to the last one. This one is almost a convoluted one, but a fairly simpler version of that. What is this? In this particular one, it places the main clause more or less in the middle of the sentence, okay, with subordinate elements all around it. So something like the convoluted structure, but this does not split through the structure of the sentence. Okay, it does not place any subordinate elements within the main clause. What it does is it arranges itself around the main clause. Okay, sometimes in the front, sometimes at the back, as in as it is done. So look at the example. Having wanted to walk on the sea like Saint Peter, he had taken an involuntary bath using his Smith ray and the better part of his reputation. Now, what is the main clause in?
He had taken an involuntary bath.
He had taken an involuntary bath is your main clause. And then around it, you have the subordinate clauses, both beginning with participles, okay, having ing form. Both of them are arranged around this main clause. Okay, having to work on the sea like Saint Peter, then the latter part losing his nature and the better part of his reputation towards the end of it. Okay. Both those subordinate clauses are arranged around your main clause. So this is about sentence structure. Okay, you don't have to remember the name of this as this is center, this is convoluted or periodic and other things. Just keep the styles in mind. Just know the arrangement of these clauses in a sentence. Okay, and know when and where they are used or for what purpose they are used. Okay? This one was the loose structure. They definitely won't be a good thing to be used in the formal writing given its informal tone and the relaxed tone. What is better suited for the purpose of our writing would be your second one, which is the periodic set, where you arrange the subordinate clause at the end, right? So, sorry, the main clause at the end in order to provide more emphasis to what you are writing. Right? Then we looked at convoluted structure. I told you can use them, but very sparingly, owing to the fact that there are intervening elements in between the structural components of a sentence. It should be very sparingly used. It should be only used when you want to add a variety. When there is a compulsion, a compelling reason to add variety to what you are writing, you can use convoluted structure, but mostly a no for formal writing. Sentence structure, again, we'll see what they are used for. They can be used for simpler writing, okay, because it can reduce chances of obscurity. What does obscurity mean? Confusion. Okay, in our terms, confusion. It can reduce chances of obscurity because it's a fairly straightforward thing. Okay. Another advantage could be that it is easier to arrange sentence elements to reflect natural order. So, especially if you're if you are involved in, say, a formal piece of writing which needs to employ a sequential order, like say you are drafting a booklet giving instruction to assemble a product. Okay, in such cases, using sentence structures that imitate the one in center structure will help you a lot. Okay, because it helps you arrange things in the natural order of its existence. Okay, the sentence itself stylistically takes that particular pattern of sequential order. So it's easier for you to use these sentences when you're designing, say, like that I just told you, right? Like a booklet booklet that gives instruction to assemble a product, a brochure, okay, anything of this sort, or say preparing a diet chart, etc. All of them can use sentence of this fashion. Okay, so keep this also in mind. And I'll reiterate this, and have been doing this from the beginning of this class, that The style you choose is dependent on your audience and your purpose and your scripts, right? So depending on what you are preparing, all the styles can be experimented with. Some of the styles, some of the spaces, some of the write-ups will help you to combine all of them. Like say in an essay, you have to use all of this. Every style that we discussed here, every pattern that we discussed here, the essay gives you the permission to use all of them in a combination. However, certain kind of writing spaces in email, again, you have different sorts of emails. So when we're looking at promotional emails, I told you, it's always good to begin with a shorter sentence and then go shorter sentence which conveys the main idea and then go on to the details, right? But a different email, say a complaint email, will not look like a promotional email. A complaint email will make use of, say, a centered structure or will make use, say, a periodic structure because you want to come to the point, but in detail. And you also have to convey to the person that we are serious about this, right? So depending on your purpose of writing and the medium that you choose to write, these styles will take different forms, okay? Or the styles you choose would be based on that. Okay. My purpose is to show you that these things exist, and we'll see when we take up the writer part. We'll see how to employ some of them, and we'll definitely do it this. So yes, this was about that. Now, so we finished with all the styles.
Ma'am, can you go to the previous the previous one? How to use it? Yeah, that
One,
yeah. The once again the advantage. The second point you can just explain it.
second point. Another advantage of it is that you can arrange it in sentence elements to reflect natural order of events. Okay. So one good thing about this particular structure is that it helps you to build a sequential order. So as I gave you an example of the writing, say, a manual or a booklet. If you use sentences wherein you have the you have a main clause that is in the middle, and then arranged with subordinate clauses or phrases arranged around it, it's a better way. It helps you to see how the sequences of event progress. Okay. Whenever you need to use it for sequential arrangement of things in order, this would be useful. We'll look at that particular paragraph here. This is not from a booklet or anything, but I think it will serve the purpose of explanation. So look at that. After 10 years fighting to little purpose, after the loss of about 1,000 men and the debt remaining of 20 millions, we at length hearkened to the terms of peace, which was concluded and to Holland, but none at all to us, and clogged soon after with the treaty of partition. Okay, so we are told that the main clause is in the middle of all of this. So which one is the main clause?
After the loss of hundred of thousands men and the remaining of
That's for you to check. You know how a main clause looks by now. It should have a subject, it should have a, and it should be a complete sentence on its own. Right? It should give you the complete meaning. So check for the part which has that.
We at length hearkened to the terms of.
Correct. Right? That particular
Yes.
part becomes your main clause, and everything else is arranged around it. And if you look at it carefully, they all come in the sequential order also. Okay. Look at it. They begin from what has happened first. So what happened? There was a fighting that happened for 10 years. They lost it. What did they lose? They lost 100,000 men, and then it was followed by a debt of 20 million, right? And then after it concluded, so they talk about we at length happened with the terms of peace. Okay, we tried to bring peace through these things, but then when all this concluded, right? It gave advantage to the empire and to Holland, but none of us. Okay, and clocked soon after the treaty of partition. So it is all given in the order of sequence that happened in. This is about the description of a war that has happened in some country. Okay, we do not know. Since we don't know the context, we cannot comment more on this. But do you see the sequence of events? Right?
Yes, ma'am.
That structure has helped render a natural sequence of events. So the point is that if you're building in a natural sequence around things, then probably this style helps a lot to arrange your to give the impression to the reader that yes, This is something being discussed in the chronological sequential order. Okay. Right. So that's the four styles that we have. So beginning from segregating to flight-range style, and then parallel style to the last one, which is subordinating style. Subordinating style was mostly about discussing how subordinate clauses and phrases are arranged in a sentence in order to give it varied stylistic expressions. Okay, and we looked at four different types of them. Now, this one is important. Fragment. The last part in this arrangement of sentences based on their length would be fragment. We are all very familiar with this particular thing. Okay, and we use them very commonly in our day-to-day lives also. Okay, fragments are any that is lesser than a sentence. Okay, something that stands alone. I mean, if you use them, people do understand what you mean by them. However, grammatically, they are not independent, right? And they don't contain, grammatically your requirement is the subject and verb and all that. This particular thing will not have grammatical accuracy. It may not be grammatically accurate and it may not be grammatically independent also. However, they are standalones. They can stand alone and can give and can provide for meanings to people. So how do they look like? They could be words, they could be phrases, or they could be dependent clauses. Okay. So if I'm to talk about it in terms of the structures that we see in the language, it could be words, or it could be phrases, or it could be dependent clauses too. What it is not? It is not a sentence. Okay, because the sentence needs to be grammatically independent. This one is not. Okay, so it cannot be a sentence, but anything lesser than that. Okay, in formal writing, we do not allow for too much use of fragments. It's only occasionally allowed only if you are planning to, like, in the case of convoluted structure, if you are planning to add some variety to the writing, again depends on what medium purpose you are choosing to write and communicate. In such cases, if variety is quintessential to the form that you are writing, like say an advertisement or say a promotional email, if it is quintessential to the write-up that you are taking up, then to add variety to it, to add emphasis to it, sometimes you are allowed to use fragment. But remember, fragment is not something is allowed in all forms of formal writing. Okay, like say an essay. Essay will definitely not take fragment. It won't allow. Okay, letters will not allow. At least formal letters will not. No, none of formal letters or semi-formal letters will allow for fragments. Okay, fragments are sometimes also referred to as run-on sentences. Okay, which means not a sentence, not grammatical. Okay, so not all formal spaces are going to allow for frags, but some of them, depending on whether it requires you to bring in some variety and bring in some sort of wherein you need to add some flavor to your writing, an amusement flavor to your writing. Sometimes it is allowed. Okay, and I think the most common example wherein you use them are in the ads. Okay, but to give you an example quickly, look at that example to understand, so that you understand what a fragment means. Look at that. Do you understand? Perfectly. Do you hear such sentences in day-to-day conversations? Right, wherein you don't answer anything with like full sentences. You choose to answer it in fragments. Okay. See this? Do you understand? Perfectly. Do you see this? Yes. The full version would be yes, I can see this. But then you say, do you see this? Yeah, yes. Okay. So that second part of all of that perfectly, they all form frags. Okay. Now let's look at this one. I told you about the add part. Look at all of them. Look at the first one. Brought up right, Gonvita right. Okay. Do any one of them form full sentences? What is missing in that? The first one, brought up right, Gonvita right.
I
In
think
terms
subject.
of grammatical expression. Yeah, the subject is not there. Or rather, it is trying to masquerade, trying to imitate, or trying to tell us that, see, Bonvita is what we are referring to, but because they don't want to do over marketing, they placed it second and put up the major part first, saying brought up right, trying to drill something into the parents, saying that if you want to bring up your children right, then take Bonvita, give them Bonvita, right? So yes, an avert subject is missing, or rather the subject is placed to the second part of the fragment. Okay, that's nice strategy. So somebody who wants to remain safe from, coming outright as an advertisement unit, they placed it very trickily at the latter part of the ad. Okay, so brought up right, Bonvita bright. The second one, high thirst by thirst. Okay, that's the most fragmented it can get. By thirst, by thirst. Same thing. You don't have any subject, you don't have any verb, you have nothing. You just have, like, say, a phrase. I thirst, by thirst. Okay. Introducing the good night cup. The third one. The Cadbury's ad.
Ma'am, can we say it is a fragment in second ad?
It is a fragment. I thirst, by thirst. Why will it not be a fragment? Because see, it does not have a subject, it does not have a verb, nothing that fulfills the criteria of becoming a sentence, right? Yeah,
Okay,
can
ma'am.
you see that? Huh. So,
It is fragment, no?
it is fragment, definitely. I mostly will use fragments, particularly, if they do not have like a video ad as we see these days. Even in video ads, you can see these things. People don't prefer using big notions, especially when they have to give an ad line, they prefer using smaller ones, smaller fragments, okay, not full sentences. The ad video can have a full concept built around, something. You can have a situational role play and those things. But when you have to put up that one single hand poster that has to go out as the ad for, say, your billboards and other things. If you look at billboards as you travel in the city or wherever you live, okay, you will see if the same company's billboard will have a very different kind of thing going on, and those will be mostly fragments. Uh, Yeah, the third one, introducing the good night cup. Now, this is another kind of fragment. Again, they're fragment, but look at that, introducing the good night cup. So this is what you call a participial fragment. Okay, why? Because you have the ing participle here. Okay, introducing the good night cup. So these are all different, methods in language, different techniques and styles in language to come up with that. The first one and the second one were phrases without subject and all those things. In this one, again, you have a subject, but then the verb is absent. And additionally, they are using a participle to form the fragment. So introduce good night cup. The last one is the literals come alive with freshness. Okay, come alive with freshness is not a looks like it is a sentence when you don't have a subject in here. It looks morely, it mimics your imperative sentences wherein the subject is lacking, but it is not in that. Okay, it's like just looks like an instruction or something like that, but it's actually not if you look at it carefully. Okay, come alive with freshness. Okay. Again, no tense, no verb, nothing.
Ma'am,
So
here
this
the
would
word
be, yeah.
here the word come is mimicking the subject.
No. Subject is, see, this is mimicking an imperative sentence. When I say come alive with freshness, I mean you come alive with freshness, right? The ad is trying to tell the customer the same thing, you come alive with freshness, right? So it is mimicking imperative sentence in that sense. But the problem here is that there is, when you look at a sentence, a good sentence in English, it needs to have a finite verb. And that is also missing here in this particular ad on the levels ad, right? So look at it. It is mimicking imperative sentence, want to imitate the tone of a command or an instruction. But because, there are companies, they cannot really do that. Okay. So instead of using a tagline like use Liril or use our product or something like that, they have come up with a very different method to put it around. They have said come alive with freshness. A very light version of making you, a very lighter version of telling you that you should buy our products. Okay. Advertisements use many methods to for the marketing strategies, but our focus here is not on that part. We are just looking at the structure that they use in their language. Okay.
Ma'am, here the freshness, it is an adverb or adjective?
Freshness is not adverb or adjective. It's a noun, right? Anything that ends with nes is to be a noun.
Which fresh? Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Freshness. It's like happiness. Happiness is a noun. Freshness is also a noun. Okay. Right. So that was about it. We look at types of fragments. Okay. So that is what actually we were looking at in those ads. Some of them were present, some of them weren't. I was not able to find the examples for others. So anyway, I'll tell you what those are. Okay. So single word fragments, yes, that's also possible. But more than that, fragments in composition. Thing about fragments that appear in longer piece of writing, that is in composition, they are less likely to be single words uh, in their expression. They will be mostly like phrases or clauses, or they would be like usually the modifiers that are detached from words they modify. Now, what does that mean? Look at those three examples that you have on the screen. Detached participial phrase. Okay, so if you have to locate fragments in a longer piece of writing or in a composition, it is not going to look like the ones that you saw here. Okay, the ones you see in longer composition is not going to represent the ones that you saw on the ad. They take a different approach. What is it? It is going to appear like this. The first one, the participial phrase. I saw her going down the street. Okay, going participial phrase because you have going, the ing form. Okay, that is referred to as the participial. That is the participial here. And that particular part is the one which is not grammatically complete or grammatical. Hence, you call it the detached participial phrase fragment. Okay, that makes up the fragment. I saw her going down the street. Right? Now, next one is detached adjectival clause. Look at the example. Everyone left except John, who decided to stay. Okay, now this is an adjectival clause because who decided to stay, that particular fragment refers to John. It is modifying John, who decided to stay. Okay, now the last one is detached adverbial clause. It was very late when the party broke up. Again, the second part of that expression is your fragment, and that fragment particularly talks about what? It talks about the time referred to in the previous one, when the party broke up. So it modifies your verb here. Okay, the time of the verb, time of the happening of the event. Okay, so then it becomes your adverbial clause, and because it's a fragment and it is detached from the main sentence mentioned here, you call it a detached adverbial clause. Okay, are these three understood? Why we call them participial phrase, detached adjectival clause, and detached adverbial clause? Clear? Why we call them adjectival and adverbial and participial?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, please explain the first one.
Which one? The participial phrase.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, it is called a participial phrase because the fragment here behaves like a participle. Going, ing forms. These ing forms, they are used also as participles, or participles as they are referred to. Ing you might most commonly find used as a progressive aspect in tense, but another use of ing in English is also to be used as a participle form. Okay, going down the street. There is another word for it. I am not using it on purpose because two words is going to confuse you. Just know this ing usage. Now, see, the ed forms are also referred to as participial forms sometimes. Okay, not when they are used as the past tense marker, but when they are added to make them as an adjective. So something like bored. Okay, I was bored in the class. Okay. No, not that sentence. The class was boring. Okay. So in that, ing form is used as a participle. Then ed forms also. This is a so you can say this was a tiring class, or you can say this was a how do I use it with ed? I need a verb with that. Okay, anything that you can quickly come up with while I look it up? We have seen ed forms of adjectives. Have you come across before, or are you listening this for the first time? Yeah, anyone? Nobody with a response? Are you still with me, or? You have heard this example, no? That this was a tiring class. This kind of usage you have seen, right?
Yeah, ma'am.
Right. You can also so along with this, you can also have an ed form of this. Both of them used as adjectives. Okay. So say something like he's bored, or we are bored. Okay. In that particular sentence, you are not using this as a verb. Here, this is an adjective. Okay. Get the difference? Yes, no.
Yes,
No.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. So this is what, so this particular usage with ed and ing, this is referred to as the participle forms of the adjectives. Okay. So the detached participial form that you see in your screen, it refers to that. Okay, participle generally refers to that. Right? So whenever you see this ing form of the ed form to in the fragment, you need to understand that this is a detached participial phrase. Okay, adjectival and adverbial is easy to understand from the context, but this one, ing forms and ed forms mostly common. But in cases of fragments, more than ed forms, you will find the ing forms. Okay. And if this happens when we are talking about a longer piece of writing, not like the ones that you saw in advertisements or otherwise. In a longer form of composition, in a longer form of writing, you can find all of these these three fragments that you see on the screen. Okay, understood?
Yes, ma'am.
No. Okay. Now the last one would be like we were discussing the verbless statement. Okay, look at that example. All people, whether in the city or country. Okay, so you're referring to all people, whether in the city or the country. You have no verb anything, but it is understood. It's not like the person did not understand what is being referred to. You understood that it's being, you're talking about the people, all people, including the ones living in the country or the city. However, this understanding has come to you without the presence of a verb. Okay. Right. So this is a verbless statement. And remember, fragments, all are ungrammatical. I told you that they stand on forces. That means you can stand on your own. Not be grammatical, they may not grammatically independent or absolute. However, the people is, and particular these fragments, we can understand what the speaker is intended to do. Okay. So, the example with the verb, all people, whether in the city or country, also accounts to a fragment. Okay, so these are the different types of fragments that you can see in the English language, out of which the single word fragments are not common to longer compositions and writing. However, all the other, the detached participial phrase, the detached adjectival clause, detached adverbial clause, and verbless statements are all, I mean, they can all become a part of the longer composition and longer writers. Okay. Now about effective fragments. Okay. What can be an effective fragment? Now we have seen so many of them. The obvious question would be, but how do I use it in a way that it doesn't look awkward? Okay. So one thing about fragments is that, especially in the formal space, if it is not carefully designed and if it's not used with care, if it is not handled with care, it can look really out of the place. Okay? It can really look out of the place and can actually do a disservice to your overall writing. So how and when can we use fragments in writing to make it effective is also important. So you can use them when you are, say, talking, when you are expected to use an unusual tone, say a tone of excitement, or when you want to, say, elicit a response from your uh, writer, right? In such case, in cases where you want to grab people's attention, in cases where when you want to emphasize on a particular aspect, all of these things, when you meet with circumstances like this, you can use fragments in there. Okay, but in any other cases, if you're using it without a purpose, without defining and knowing the context well, it can definitely look out of the place, and it can be counteractive too, right? That means it's going to bring in unnecessary, unwarranted, unneeded attention to what you're writing. It can go down with the way you. It will not go well with the way people would perceive things from it. Okay, so again, like I told about everything else, be very careful of the medium and the context that you are using. Okay, unless there is thoroughly a need to use them, keep away from them. Okay, so a general advice in formal writing would be that keep away from them unless your context defines it properly, or there is an absolute need of using them, and you also think that I have a benefit in using this thing. You can use it. Otherwise, stay away. Okay, this wouldn't be the best way to write things. Fragments always do not form the good way to write these things. Okay, so you can have a look at the examples where the authors have tried to use it to build context and bring in unusual tone to their writing. Many a man, Shakespeare, has been haunted by the nightmare that one day nations might be dominated by technical means. That nightmare was almost realized in Hitler's totalitarian system. Almost, but not quite. So, which part of this is the fragment? Do you have one fragment, or do you have more than one fragment in that sentence?
One is almost.
It's almost, but not quite. Okay, that particular part.
Ma'am, it
What
is a
kind of
complete
fragment?
almost, but
Complete. Almost, but not quite. Not just almost.
okay.
Anyone, what kind of fragment this is? We looked at this part, no? Does it fit any one of the ones that we discussed here?
Adjectival.
Adjectival. Explain.
No, ma'am, it is adverbial.
Is adverbial? Okay. Again, explain.
Ma'am, because it is pointing to the nightmare that the people will have.
It talks about how mostly, right? Pointing towards if it is pointing towards a nightmare, then shouldn't it be adjectival? That nightmare was almost raised in Hitler's totalitarian system. You are right about adverbial, detached adverbial clause, but the explanation was wrong. It is not talking about nightmare. What is it talking about? If you understand what adverbial clause means, others who are listening.
Totalitarian.
No.
That's what
Look at that.
Look
Look at the sentence that has gone before that. That nightmare was almost realized in.
Realized, ma'am.
Yeah, it's talking about realize, right? The verb realize. It can be adverbial only if it talks about the verb. And here, if you look at it closely, I thought you can see it. I can see it. That nightmare was almost realized in Hitler's totalitarian system. Almost, but not quite, is about realize, not about anything else. Okay. It's about the action of realization, not anything else. You see that? If you are able to see it, then now you can see it. Huh?
Is that not the state of totalitarian?
Not the state of totalitarian. Almost, but not quite, is about the verb realize. It's talking about how it was realized. It is saying almost, but not quite. Right? So sweeping criticism of this type, like much other criticism, throws less light on the subject than on the critic himself. A light not always impressive. Now, what is this? Should be easier for you. What kind of detached fragment is this?
I think adjectival.
This one is adjectival because what is it talking about?
Criticism.
Shresha, you're right. Yeah, it is talking about what?
Criticism.
Criticism, right? It's talking about the sweeping criticism. So this one is easier to identify. This is an adjectival, detached adjectival clause fragment. Okay, so you can employ these fragments in your writing, provided they're extremely necessary, and then they can be useful to you. Keep these things in mind while you're crafting. But again, I will, like I told you always, or I tell you always, please make sure that you're using them in spaces where they're absolutely required. Use things sparingly. First advice. Second thing is, if you are to use it, if you should use it, make sure that you define your context clearly. Identify whether they are necessary and they can help you rather than create troubles for you. If these things, if you can check on all these boxes, then this would be a best method to add flavor to the writing. Okay. Yes. So I think we can stop with this today. We have just one more thing remaining in this before we go to the practices. This is for arrangement of uh, phrases and structures within the sentence. All this while we were talking about how different sentences can be arranged in terms of length and style. The next part we will look at how you can do things within the sentence. Okay, how we can arrange group things together within a given sentence in order to bring in stylistic variation. Okay, or depending on purpose. Fragments are mostly used in literary writing, right? Even though it is used very sparingly. Uh, in writing, I can just say that they are used in all kinds of writing. In literary writing, if you are asking if they are used in fictions, then we don't say anything about fiction or creative writing because that is a very different zone altogether. We won't be discussing anything that is used there. When we discuss fragments in fictional writing, we will have to talk about a lot of things. And the problem with fictional writing is that almost everything is justified. I cannot go and tell an author that, you know what, I don't like the way you write. It will be like, fine, you don't read it. No issues. Okay. So there is no set rule for people who write in fictional space. They can always come up their own techniques and their own methods, which they think will suit a set of readers. And people are way more forgiving in the fictional space. We don't mind, right? Like you go look at cartoons, you will find lot of fragments there. Some of the fragments are ridiculous also. They break through, open the words. They are allowed to do all those things, okay? Because people know that this is that kind of a medium, and those experiments are completely ended. So one cannot say fragments just belong to literary writing, but I can say that they could be mostly used in fictional writing, given that it doesn't follow a set rule. But that does not mean fragments cannot be used in formal writing, like we just explained. Like in certain cases, we can do in formal writing also. Right. So yeah, the answer is yes and yes. The first one, are they only used in literary writing? No, that we just discussed. Are they used mostly in literary writing? Yes. Most commonly used in literary writing. Okay.
Ma'am, what is mean by Mitra? It is a Hindi
What is
word.
it? No, no, no,
I
no. It is not Hindi word. Oh, this is from the previous
yeah.
example that, yeah, right? Okay, I think we'll have to look at the sentence for that. Remember which side it was? Let me see. This one, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to work on the sea like Saint Peter. He had taken an involuntary. Okay. Myth here it actually refers to some kind of a headgear that people wear. You see this headgear refers to the turban like the headdresses that people wear. No, if you have seen certain dance forms, they wear certain kind of headdress on their head. Have you seen those? But in this sentence, it refers to reputation. Okay. Losing his mitre here refers to reputation. It's another way of putting the fact that he lost his mind or the person lost his importance. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Literal meaning would be a headdress. Okay. Something that you wear on your head to highlight the head part of the body. Okay. You'll find this in dance forms and some kind of role plays and all that. But in this particular sentence, it refers to his importance and his might and his reputation. The latter part talks about reputation. So this one here refers to his importance. Okay, losing his importance is what it's referring. Get it?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Anything? Okay, no problem. Anything else, guys? Any questions? Okay, so if we do not have anything on record, then maybe we can call it a meet next week. Okay, and discuss more on these things. One last part on the styling within the sentences before we actually get into the actual writing, okay, the emails and the letters and all those other things. Okay, so we'll discuss more on formal language and formal. By formal language, I mean business language. Okay, all this while we will be discussing formal writing of how you can do these things. But when it comes to emails and other things, the discussion needs to be more centered around the business language. Okay, so that we'll do from the week after. But if these things are understood and you have no doubts, then maybe we can wrap up today's session. Okay, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, ma'am.